All right, welcome back, everyone. Hello, can you hear me? Is that better? I can't hear the microphone in the room's not on. There we go. Hello. All right, welcome back, everyone. In continuation with the ASA. Now, Deputy Chair, you have the call.
Thank you, Chair. Just so I understand, the Defence Secretary passed around an allocation or division of responsibility sheet. Am I able to ask ASA anything on Pillar 2, or is that completely out of your remit?
Senator Vice Admiral Jonathan Mead, Director General, the ASA, Pillar 2 resides within Defence itself. They have their own organisation. It's not within our remit.
Okay, understood. Could I ask about Sterling's preparedness then, HMAS Sterling's preparedness?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Are you able to provide an update on works to uplift HMAS Sterling in preparation for its SRF West, isn't it, in 2027?
So I'll hand over to Rear Admiral Tom Phillips, who's new in the job, but has been over in Western Australia for a number of years, commanding and leading submarines, and most recently commanding the submarine squadron, to brief on Surf West and Western Australia.
Good evening, Senators. Rear Admiral Tom Phillips. I'm the head of nuclear submarine capability. So at Surf West, we have in the development of Surf West, the first major milestone is being ready to host Surf West, and that's also part of the continuum for us to be sovereign ready. The main lines of effort in Surf West are around developing the workforce, both uniform and industry workforce, the family support network for our visiting foreign servicemen and contractors, also the upgrade of the facilities there to support Surf West, and a number of other things as we go to Surf West. So I would say that the major culmination of that activity was the submarine tendered maintenance period, which we did last year on USS Hawaii, which combined a number of those factors. That was a tender maintenance period where we had 30 Royal Australian Navy for the first time directly participating in a maintenance period. And the SMP also involved a range of simulations and demonstrations focused on safety, security and stewardship. As far as workforce goes, we have 120 uniformed workforce currently going through the Nuclear Power School and other schools in America and serving on USN warships. As far as the industrial workforce goes, we've reached our first milestone target of 130 ASC workers who are currently getting qualified at the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. With family and support services, we've been working in conjunction with SEG to look at the housing and the family support that the US will require when they come here, and the UK personnel around housing, family support, and there's arrangements now that the first group of US will be the team that does the community support for those families when they come.
Sorry, what's SEG, Rear Admiral Phillips?
Oh, sorry, that's the
Security and State Group.
Yeah,
that's the other
within
part of Defence. Ms.
Yeah.
Perkins is the DepSec there, right? Okay, good, thank you.
My assessments of all those lines of effort are that it's as Admiral Mead said, a challenging schedule. There is technical risk in there, but in my short time in the agency, I see no reason that we're not on track to achieve that first milestone in 2027.
In terms of you mentioned the upgrade of facilities, so have works commenced on the upgrade of facilities, the physical works, rather than the human capital side?
Yeah, we've commenced, the first set of works were on the training facility, which commenced in November this year.
Plus, in addition,
sorry, November last year, November 2024.
Sorry, November 24.
In addition to that, Senator, we've repurposed a number of existing facilities, maintenance sheds, command headquarters that were in existence and are now ready to go.
Do you mind if we just go into the detail there in terms of what works have been done? So you've upgraded the maintenance sheds and the command headquarters?
So we've essentially repurposed
Yeah.
a number of the maintenance sheds that would be specifically designed to support Surf West, and we've allocated and made space for US command personnel to come and utilise that area to support their submarines.
Okay.
In addition to all the work that Admiral Phillips mentioned, as well as security uplift, emergency services uplift, and social licence. And I would like to mention social licence. We sort of hosted a visit of a number of the mayors of Rockham, Coburn, Kawana, Fremantle, East Fremantle and Melville, and the CEOs to San Diego and Newport News, Norfolk in early September 2024, so that they could talk to the San Diego yard there, ask a range of questions, get a sense of, you know, what they need to understand, what was the delta, and they provided a report. It was a really good, informative report, and we're working on that at the moment. For instance, one of the things they said was, you know, nuclear literacy is not as strong in Australia as what it is in the US, so our messages that we communicate need to be structured in such a way that the public understands them.
Okay. Do you also have engagement with the WA state government, Vice Admiral Mead, and who conducts that on behalf of ASA?
Yeah, so we have our main ASA-led activity with the WA government is through the WA MPS, Nuclear Power Submarine Steering Group with the Department of JITSI in the West Australian Government. So I co-chair that with their director.
Okay. And what about at the political level? Like, do you meet with the Premier, for instance, Vice Admiral Mead, or do you meet with elected members of the WA?
Mostly meet with Minister Papali'i. I see him on a very regular basis. But I have been with Premier Cook and the Deputy Prime Minister, the three of us, on numerous occasions. I think I mentioned that in my opening speech only 2 weeks ago. We were over in Western Australia opening up a new trade centre.
Okay. How many times would you have met with Mr Papali'i, if I'm saying that correctly? Is there a regular schedule of meetings, or it's...?
It's probably more irregular, but I would say I've met with him probably a dozen times.
Okay. And how does that compare to the South Australian state government, so with Premier Malinauskas or the relevant state minister there?
So I've probably met Premier Malinauskas 20, 25 times. I'm meeting him again, I believe, next week and then the week after.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, very specific purpose, obviously, in he and his team understanding and supporting the work at Osborne and the yard there.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of the works you mentioned that are underway there, so I believe at the June 2024 estimates, the department, we were advised that $63.5 million of the $1.5 billion allocated for Surf West had been spent, and I think we were told $95 million was expected to be spent by the end of last financial year. That's the financial year ending June 2024. How much have we spent now of that $1.5 billion?
We'll just get our CFO to
of course. Thank you.
Run us through those figures.
Good evening, Senator. Marlena Davis, Chief Financial Officer. For the 23-24 year, there was, I think the actual result for HMS Sterling Works was $98 million.
$98 million. And how much have you spent since? I appreciate that.
I'd have to take that one on notice for year to date, for 24-25.
Okay. And of the $98 million, are you able just to provide a rough breakdown of how
I'd have to take that on notice to provide a further breakdown of that.
Okay. Do you have a figure that you expect to spend this financial year? What's in the forecast of the budget?
So, just 1 second. Hayes document what we're expecting to spend. Table 64, the revised estimate for 24-25 is 211 million.
So that's so that's not cumulative, is it? It's
No,
211,
that's
and then there'd be
in
the
this
98
financial
from the
year, so-
previous financial year. Okay. And the plan is for Surf West to be operational in 2027, that's correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, mid-2027, early 2027, the start of 2020? Is there a specific time in that year?
So we obviously would like to do it as soon as possible, and we are aiming for, Q1, Q2, 2027. A number of US officials have come and inspected the facilities at Surf West. When we did the submarine tender maintenance period, Admiral Houston, who's the Director of Naval Reactors, inspected all the facilities and gave a press conference and indicated that he believed Australia was on track. Indo-PACOM was in Australia last week, Admiral Paparo. He indicated that the US are preparing, making very strong preparations to send their first submarine to Stirling in 2027.
Okay. And have you had any communications from the United States, public or private, indicating any concerns about the ability to meet that timeline?
No.
No? Okay. And have we got any US or UK personnel currently working at HMAS Stirling as part of the preparations for Surf West becoming operational?
Yes, we have two in the supporting the ASA, and we have long-standing US embeds into the submarine headquarters.
How many, by the end of this year, so how many, is that number growing? Is that?
Yes, so we're expecting the 5 in the next, in the next month or so, the 5 and they're mainly around the family support, and then between 50 and 80 by the end of this year coming out to start the US build-up of personnel.
So 50 to 80, and that's, US personnel or US and UK personnel?
US personnel in the first tranche.
Okay, and UK personnel?
Yeah, we have two UK embedded. So we have, two UK as well embedded.
Okay, okay. And then what's the sort of end state? What the numbers we'd be expecting by 2027 when Surf West is close to being ready?
So by 2027, we would expect one boat, so about 140 crew when the boat comes, but also a headquarters staff supporting our headquarters of, I think, approximately 100 personnel.
Okay. And then just Ms Davis, isn't it?
Yes.
If I come to you again, have you had any indications whether the works, the $1.5 billion that's been allocated, are you tracking over budget, under budget?
At the moment, it's tracking to budget.
Okay.
There has been some changes, slight in phasings across that forward estimates period, but it's tracking to those estimates.
Okay, thank you. Chair, that was all I had. Senator Patterson, did you want to? You had nothing to continue from before dinner?
I thought Senator Rilson would have some on him.
All right.
I'll just check on that.
Well, I might hand to Senator Shoebridge in the middle in the meantime, and then if you could just assist me with Senator Reynolds, that'd be awesome. All right, Senator Shoebridge.
Thanks, Chair. Vice Admiral Reid, can you remind me how much was paid to the UK? Sorry.
Sorry, remind you.
The relevant officer was just heading off, so I was going to come to it in a minute, but let's
contribution
do it now. How much has been paid to the UK as a contribution for their industrial base for their nuclear?
I'll just hand to the CFO.
Yes.
Okay. As I mentioned, in 23-24, it was £149 million.
Yeah, I had that figure, but I didn't have the Australian dollar
The Australian
equivalent.
dollars. 285.
285 million.
85 million Australian.
And that was in 23-24. And you were going to get the date on notice. Have you?
Yes, I've taken that
You
one
still
on
haven't?
notice.
Yep. And there's another payment due. When?
25-26.
All right, so next financial year, and how much is that going to be?
I'd have to take that one on notice.
All right, and I think you were going to provide a full schedule.
Yes.
And the total commitment is £2.4 billion, is that right?
Yes.
All right. Thanks very much for the numbers. Do we know where that $285 million was applied?
When you mean...
What was the last word?
Do we know where the £149 million, the first payment, do we know what it was applied to?
So primarily applied to the uplift of the Rolls-Royce facility at Derby.
All right, and that's for the production of the nuclear core in the reactor?
Correct.
Yep. And do we know what is the next scheduled payment? Is it also for the Rolls-Royce facility at Derby?
So the UK, the payment is really in two main areas. It's for the uplift of the Rolls-Royce facility at Derby, and it's also to support supply chain and design costs.
All right.
So the UK are apportioning the money as they see from a priority basis.
All right. Now, Vice Admiral, I think you said in answers to my colleague that since we'd last spoken, there'd been no slippage of the arrangements with the UK and no fresh concerns had been raised. Is that right? No slippage, no concerns. I recall you saying emphatically.
I said no concerns, but I then caveated that and said this program is very high risk. We've made that clear to government. Government has made that clear to the public. This is the most ambitious undertaking any government has brought forward.
But you were quite clear that no concerns have been brought to your attention since we last spoke.
I said no additional concerns on timelines have been raised.
Okay. Has the UK Infrastructure and Projects Authority annual report on major projects for 23-24, which was delivered on the 16th of January this year, has that been brought to your attention? It
has been brought to my attention. I've got it in front of me. You'll note, though, that I think that they wrote the forward there on March 24. So this report is using data accurate as of the 31st of March 24. So that's an important caveat because since the 31st of March 24, a number of payments, both by the UK government and shortly to come the Australian government, will have and has been injected into the Rolls-Royce facility. And you can look this up, but in September 24, the United Kingdom made an initial allocation of nearly £4 billion to work on SSN AUKUS and £3 billion to expand the production capabilities across the defence nuclear enterprise. On the 24th of January this year, the UK announced a Rolls-Royce contract worth approximately £9 billion to bolster support for its submarine capability. So since the March 24 report, there has been significant investment by the UK government. I know the table that you're referring to there, where it's got the red rectangles there, but the UK government is addressing that, and we are addressing that as well.
Well, let's go to the report that was delivered on the 16th of January this year. One of the major projects they assessed was what's called the core production capability in the UK, which it says delivers safe nuclear reactor cores to meet the Royal Navy's submarine program now and for the long term. It's going to provide reactors for the deterrent submarine fleet. And then it says, and sovereign capability to manufacture further cores for a fleet of flexible and adaptable attack submarines delivered under the AUKUS agreement. Like, this is a non-negotiable element for the AUKUS submarines, isn't it, this working?
Yes, Senator.
Yeah. And for the obvious reasons that a nuclear submarine without a nuclear reactor core is not a nuclear submarine at all. This is the program that's going to produce the reactor for the AUKUS submarines. That's
Yes,
we're talking
Senator.
about that. Cool. Well, you see, this report delivered on the 16th of January by the UK IPA gave this project a red rating. It's the third year. Did you know it was the third year it's had a red rating?
So, Senator, I need to emphasise the data in the forward is 31st of March 2024. And
We'll come to that.
notwithstanding the fact that they delivered the report in January of this year, this report is accurate as of the 31st of March of last year. And since that time, significant investment has been made by the UK government over, looks like £18 billion for the SSN AUKUS program and the core production facility.
Well, why don't we just first of all see what the Independent Infrastructure and Projects Authority said. Their rating for not just this year, but last year and the not just 23-24, but also 22-23 and 21-22. The rating they gave was successful delivery of the project appears to be unachievable. There are major issues with project definition, schedule, budget, quality and/or benefits delivery, which at this stage do not appear to be manageable or resolvable. The project may need rescoping or its overall viability reassessed. So that was as at March 2024, data as at March 2024, an assessment delivered in January of this year. The project appears to be unachievable and its overall viability reassessed. Are you telling this committee and the Australian public that that's been fixed between March and now?
So, Senator, one of the areas that you missed was that they said one of the remediations to that is additional funding. Additional funding has been applied by the UK government. We have committed to additional funding for the core facility.
Well, you see, Vice Admiral Mead, another way of looking at it is $285 million of Australian taxpayers' money has been poured into a project that the UK Infrastructure and Projects Authority says appears to be unachievable, and the overall viability of which should be reassessed. Was any consideration given to not just the data that should have been available to you, if it was available to the IPA, but the fact that the Infrastructure and Projects Authority had said this about this project the year before and the year before? Was consideration given about that before we tipped in $285 million of Australian taxpayers' money?
So we've been given reassurances from the UK government to our High Commissioner in London that the currently anticipated timescales for future core deliveries are not expected to delay the delivery of Australia's SSN AUKUS program, noting that our cores won't be delivered till the 2030s.
You've been to the UK. Has anyone from the ASA gone to the UK and sought a briefing from the Ministry of Defence about this report?
Not from this report. We have spoken to them at depth about the reactor and the core. The Deputy Prime Minister has been to that facility. I've been to that facility twice. They've actually even shown us parts that are being built right now for our core.
Well, you see, Vice Admiral Mead, a visit by you, a highly structured visit by you, with all due respect, without the access to the relevant documentations or the engineering plans for a day, is hardly a substitute for the thorough and detailed analysis provided by the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, is it?
And I think the challenge, Senator, is that that is not the assertion that's being put to you by Vice Admiral Mead. obviously there has been very significant engagement between the agency and the UK and our partners there, and officials can talk you through it, but it is not reasonable to characterise his answer in that way.
Well,
All
you
right,
said
last question, because I need to move the call on.
You said you visited, Vice Admiral Mead. Should the Australian public take comfort from your visit, where you saw some parts being made,
Again,
against this report by the independent UK Infrastructure and Projects Authority that says the project which Australian taxpayers are somehow being committed to tip $4.8 billion into appears to be unachievable, and the overall viability should be reassessed?
And as I referred to before, Senator, that report was dated 31st of March 2024. The UK government has injected billions, over $12 billion, and we intend to inject and have injected money into the core facility to enable it to produce cores for Australia and for the UK.
Well, I'm sure you didn't mean to, but you misrepresented the date of the report. The report was dated the 16th of January 2025.
The data was with effect 31st of March 2024. If you look at the very front page there, it says commissioned under the Sunak government. This data is with effect 31st of March 2024. Those payments that I mentioned before happened in September and January this year.
We'll come back to what has happened.
And we'll come back to you as well too. Thank you, Senator.
In the 10 months since.
Senator, I need to move the
make
call
this
on.
achievable.
Senator Reynolds, you've got the call.
Thank you very much and good evening. Good to see you all. I've just got a couple of follow-on questions from Senator Sharma. In relation to the Henderson redevelopment, the previous defence officials said that the finances actually sit with ASA in terms of the money for the redevelopment and the build. They've got $127 million to do some of their initial planning projects, they said. But in terms of the funding for some more of the major works, they said to ask you. So I'm asking you.
Senator, I'll just hand over to Admiral David Mann.
Thank you.
Who's in charge or is the ASA lead for that program.
Thanks.
Senator, good evening. Rear Admiral David Mann. I'm the head of Virginia Workforce and Commercial. There are two components to which the ASA is directly involved in with the consolidation of the Henderson precinct. The first of those and the most pressing for us is the provision of the contingent dock, which I'm sure you're aware of. And the second component is the provision of depot level maintenance and the facilities that are required to support that activity. There is funding available for the contingent dock.
How much is that?
That has not, the funds for that, the amount of that money has not been released as yet. And the follow-on for the depot level maintenance and the sort of the nuclear yard component of the Henderson redevelopment or consolidation has not been developed yet in terms of overall funding, because the requirements for that yard have not been set.
So what's the timetable to set those requirements? So you've got the requirement for the contingency dock, the contingent dock?
That's correct, Senator.
Okay. And so what's the timeline for building that?
So the timeline for developing that is that we're preparing advice for government on the options for that dock. As you'd be aware, there are a number of ways you can develop a contingent dock, from a graving dock, to a floating dock or a ship synchro lift, and that dock has to be in place, ready for the contingency operations for the first of our sovereign Virginias in the early 2030s.
Because I thought there had been some discussion that that also had to be available for the visiting US Virginias in the case that they needed contingency work. So definitely not.
Senator, that's not the case. The US said if they have a problem with their Virginias, that they will make their own arrangements to get them out of the water. it's not a prerequisite for Surf West.
Okay, so you're looking, so the early 2030s and the depot, sorry, it's a long day, the depot level maintenance, what's the timeline for that at Henderson?
It's the back end of the 2030, Senator, because it's for the first cycle of when the first of our sovereign submarines would need to go into the depot level maintenance.
Okay, so most of the discussions that we've had here have been in relation to the SSNs, to the Virginias, and eventually then the AUKUS boats. What about the Astute in terms of planning, in terms of what they need? Because you would presume that they would need different facilities on Stirling and possibly at Henderson to support the Astute. What's the process and planning for that and timeline?
There's no requirement for the contingent dock for the Astute class, but I know, Tom, you want to talk about the requirements.
Is it true that I've got a memory that they do flyaway, do it quite differently from the US with the Virginias. So is there a plan in how they're going to, what support will be provided for the Astute at Stirling or Henderson?
There's a developing one at the moment, so our plan is their contracted sustainer is Babcock.
Yep.
We'll get Babcock representatives out here. The primary case for us will be building our support for Virginia class, obviously, and then leveraging off the facilities of that and then working out what the delta might be for AUKUS. It's not settled yet, but I think for the Astute, it will be a fly-in team when they do maintenance here, but that's still to be worked through with Babcock.
Okay.
And Senator, nearly all of the uplift that we're doing for Virginia will be applicable for Astute. For instance, the security uplift, the emergency management services, the wharf upgrades, the sheds and maintenance, the command headquarters will be equally applicable for the Astute. And we've had numerous UK Navy people here, including the Second Sea Lord, that's been to HMAS Stirling. They have injected their requirements into what's going on at Stirling. So the Stirling upgrade is not bespoke US. It is meant to take into account UK Astute class submarines. So
for the US Virginias and then the Astute when it does start, when it is at Stirling, so until the early 2030s, until these facilities are built at Henderson, any work that's required to be done on the Virginias and the Astute will be done in water at Stirling on Diamantina Wharf, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. So if we just come back to the money. So last estimates we talked about there was an $8 billion pot of money somewhere for a lot of this work. Celia Perkins identified that they were spending about 1.5 billion of that, but we didn't get to the bottom of where and who held the other 6.5. So one, is that 8 billion still current? Is that a figure that you're working to? And where does that money sit at the moment?
I'll let our CFO answer that question.
Thank you.
Senator.
Senator Malena Davis, Chief Financial Officer. So as you have mentioned, there is approved works underway with 1.7 billion in approved. The remaining sits in the unapproved section of our program that remains in the IRP.
Okay. But it doesn't have... Does it actually have money allocated to it in the IIP, or is it something they have to get out of contingency?
So there is an unapproved provision.
Okay, so that'd be for the remainder of the 8 billion. So is 8 billion still the figure?
Yes, out across the decade.
Okay. And when you have a look at the level of scope of works, 8 billion is not going to get all of the facilities and all of the reforms that's needed down there. So at what point will you know how the rest of this unapproved money will be spent and over what time, and what's the plan for that at the moment?
So I think sorry, go
Oh, no, I was just going to say, so the first one of the approved was for the priority works to meet Surf West, and we're now working through the requirements of what's required to meet Sovereign Ready beyond that in Stirling. I think until those requirements mature, it would be hard to assess, whether that scope of funding will meet the requirements, and plus we'll do the normal trade-off to work within that cap.
So, but what's actual scope of works will be, so are these priority works for Surf West, that's the 1.7 that has already been committed. Are you able on notice to take just take on notice what that comprises, that 1.7?
The 1.7?
Yep.
So I can tell you now.
That'd be great, thank you.
The priority works include the nuclear-powered submarine operational berths on the existing pier.
That's the Diamantina pier works?
Diamantina, yes, that's right, Senator. Emergency preparedness and response precinct, a reliable shore supply.
Sorry, what was that last one?
A reliable shore supply, just shoring up the current shore supply. Licensed facility for the radiological controlled activities. The intermediate maintenance facility, a logistics support precinct, the submarine crew certification and training area, and the physical security and uplift for the base. That's the scope of the 1.774.
And what's the time frame to deliver all of those? Would you want to take that on notice, and you could provide the sort of the timeline for each of those projects?
For each of them individually, I'd have to take on notice.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you. Oh, collectively, when is all of that package of work
so that
due to be finished?
Priority works was for Surf West.
When's that due to be finished? So I know a lot of the work's well underway, but when's it due to complete? So
for 2027.
And is all of that on track?
From what we have now, because they're all at various levels of design.
Yeah.
So from what we have now, it's on track.
And so for the remainder of the 6.3, who's doing the work, and to identify how and where that's going to be spent and what on?
So we're doing the work from a requirement setting, but the lead is the security and state group, Ms Perkins. Okay.
So that $8 billion is all for Stirling, is that correct?
That's all for Stirling.
Okay. So there was the previous defence witnesses was said to also to talk to you about funding beyond the 127 million for the immediate works and some of the planning works we went through, but indicated, if my memory serves me correct, that the rest of the money, the probably tens of billions of dollars that are going to be needed for all of the redevelopment there.
At Henderson.
At Henderson, sorry, the Henderson, yes, the Henderson precinct now. Does that sit with you?
No, it doesn't sit with us. I'll just confirm that with the CFO.
No, that's correct. It's the contingent doc that was mentioned just prior is the funding that's provisioned with the MPS program in the IRP.
So hang on, but the contingent doc's not provisioned for out of that unapproved spending of the remainder of the $8 billion. So does that sit on your ledger or does that sit in Defence's?
It sits in the MPS program,
okay,
which sits within Defence IRP.
Okay, so it is in the IRP. Okay. And is there any provision or any discussions from your perspective on, Ms Perkins mentioned that there's now some work going on to identify infrastructure around the Rockingham area in terms of dealing with that revolting traffic jam and all of the access problems we've got to the island. But is there, to the best of your knowledge, is there any other packets of work that are going on in terms of providing the infrastructure around the Henderson precinct to enable the work that you need undertaken and that you're managing, everything from transport infrastructure? I know Ms Perkins is doing the security, but have you got any exposure to any other work that's happening to make sure that your facilities there have the infrastructure and the enabling company support and things around it?
We're certainly engaged on, with SEG leading, obviously ASA is for that whole southwest metropolitan area. SEG is the lead on all the housing and the roads and transportation work, and we're obviously engaged as probably the biggest stakeholder in that.
Yeah.
But they're the lead because there are other stakeholders. We're certainly engaged with them around the support to Stirling. I'm unaware of engagement around Henderson at this point.
Okay. That's what it seemed to appear from Ms Perkins, so thank you for that. Now, one final point I'd like to come to is the issue of housing. For housing and other support services, initially for the US personnel. My understanding is that there's about, I think you said 50 to 80 Americans coming this year, and I think up to 50 of those were expected to have families coming with them. Is that?
We're in the coming days, we will start getting the breakdown of family composition of those people coming. We haven't got that yet.
Okay.
We expect indicatively 50% of those to have a family.
Yeah. And so for those who are single, I understand that the new accommodation, which is very nice, the single living accommodation will accommodate the single US service personnel, but the families, what we've been trying to pin down is who's actually organising that, because from the last estimates, DHA said that they're sourcing 550 new houses in not just Rockingham but sort of the surrounding areas, but they were all for Australian personnel, they said, and that they didn't have any requirements yet for the US and then eventually the UK personnel. What is your understanding of, so when the families start arriving from July, where are they going to be living?
So SEG again are definitely the lead. Again, we're attached into that because we are one of their stakeholders across the Defence Precinct. We are working now, DHA of course are right, their remit now is for Australian ADF personnel, and legislation would be required to change that. I know working with SEG that we are looking at options to house the families so that they would get the level of housing service that ADF members would get through other means, and we're still working through what those other means are like, but that's...
So I know the housing market down there is incredibly tight.
Yep.
And that a lot of Australian personnel, service personnel, can't get DHA houses there, which is why they're building another 550 eventually.
Yep.
So at the moment, there's not a finalised plan for these personnel and their families yet. Is that a fair summary? You're working on it, but there's not a finalised plan yet.
I think the advice from the official senator was that SEG were leading on this, and so I think, regrettably, it would have been better for you to ask those officials about that earlier in the day. I mean, obviously officials can speak to their
Well, thank you, Senator McAllister, but in the past they have referred it straight to DHA, who have then said it's not their...
That's not my recollection about what's happened in previous hearings, Senator. You've had actually quite an extended discussion with Ms Perkins about this exact same set of issues.
Yes, Senator McAllister, and I still haven't got an answer to where are these first 50-odd families going to be living, because they start arriving in a few months.
Well, it's a shame you didn't ask Ms Perkins about it when she was here earlier.
Oh,
today.
Minister, for heaven's sake.
Well, I'm simply... look, we're not trying to be unhelpful, but I think there's just a limit to what officials can tell you about work that they're not leading on.
Anyway, Minister, so if we could just come back to what your understanding of the plan is for where the US families will be staying. The other issues that I've had raised with me is not only where they will be living and what their expectations are, but is that my understanding is that there won't be a commissary available to them. There's an issue of white goods because obviously they can't bring their own white goods with them, and so I know these sound a little granular, but as we know, they're incredibly important for US service families. And also, I understand some of them are worried about how their children, what school their children will go into, because they don't know where they're going to live. So who's doing the liaison with schools? Different school years, different curriculums, different culture. So who's responsible for doing that work, not just physically where they're going to be living, but all of the rest around it? Because my concern is, and the concern that's been expressed to me by a number of Americans, is that if that's not right for the first families and they don't have a good experience, as we know, the repercussions will be exponentially larger.
So certainly,
Senator, I do think that this is being led by Defence.
Sorry? Yeah, I will. So you're saying that confidently, that Defence have all this in hand?
I'm telling
Because that's
you
not
that
the advice from Defence Minister?
No, I'm telling you that the place to ask these questions was earlier in the day, Senator. I mean, I'm happy for their officials to provide what information they do have, but I think they have already indicated to you that this is being led from within Defence.
The social issues, where on the list are all of these social integration issues. My clear understanding is that this was in the remit of ASA, and not these issues are not estate issues. The physical housing might be. But anyway, we need to move on. But Minister,
Sorry,
thank
it's
you for
just
your
that you were. I'm genuinely trying to assist, but you were talking about white goods, and the infrastructure questions. I think the advice to you was that it was being led by Defence.
Minister, with the greatest of respect, I understand, and I said it does appear a little granular, but when you've got families arriving in 4 months and they're worried about that they won't have a PX, a commissary, where are they going to live, where are their kids going to go to school, these are really important issues that have to be solved pretty quickly.
So I can say, Senator, that what we are providing, our goal is that they will have a very positive experience when they come. Those first 5 US people coming in the first quarter this year will form the support cell, their own US support cell that deal with all those issues. We also have Australians that will be in that support cell to help them interpret, if you like, our systems. And we also have a visit coming up that are looking particular at schooling as well. So although we're not the lead, SEG are the lead on housing and that sort of level of support, I'm confident with my interactions with SEG that they are dealing with some of your very real concerns, which we also think are very important.
Yep. So all of that is SEG. So they're doing the community engagement. Or is that cell going to be based at Stirling?
Yes.
Okay. So you'll have a base there.
I'm not sure exactly where they'll be based, but there'll be a cell.
You'll have someone who'll be there to
Rockingham,
handhold the families.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Oh, Deputy Chair.
As Acting Chair, Senator Shoebridge, I believe you had some more questions.
Thanks. We'll call you Deputy Chair. Yeah, refer to you appropriately. Vice Admiral Mead, did you say the 200 or the 140 odd million pound payment by Australia was made after March of 2024?
No, I think it was made before March of 2024.
I think we took that one on notice. We've taken that specific...
We've taken that on notice. What I would say...
Sorry, Vice Admiral Mead, I'm asking because you said that was one of the changed factors since this report had been delivered. And I'm just... If that was made before the March...
I understand where you're going.
So was it or was it not one of the changing factors?
Let us determine, first of all, when that payment was made, because that obviously impacts upon the date of the report, of being the 31st of March 24. The second
16th
aspect,
of January.
Sorry?
The date of the report was the 16th of January 2025.
So the date of the report may be that,
Correct.
but the data in the report, the data that you're looking at and referring to, is with effect 31st of March of 24. And if you want to, I think it's on page 2. This report is using data accurate as of the 31st of March 2024, taken under the Sunni Conservative government. So the payments that have been made since then obviously will influence the next report. But when you are injecting hundreds of millions of dollars, and in the UK's case, billions of dollars into the program, that does not have an overnight effect. I mean, for instance, what they intend to do at Derby is create a second production line. So it still may remain red next year in the report, because it may take 2 or 3 years to flow through and in order to materialise and manifest into a deliverable and an outcome. What we have been given by the UK is that the money that has been injected into Derby will be able to deliver our nuclear plants when we need them.
And I think Mr Hodgson has some information about how that's being dealt with within the UK evaluation system as well.
Senator, yes.
Sorry, but could we just quickly get an answer to my
perhaps,
question?
There is an additional piece of relevant information to this.
I'm happy to come to Mr Hodgson in a sec. I'm interested in what he has to say. But can we get an answer to my original question that I put to you, Vice Admiral Mead, which was the payment, the 140-odd million pounds paid by Australia before or after the 31st of
And the
March?
official said that had been taken on notice.
We're taking it on notice.
All right.
Senator, Mr Tim Hodgson, the Deputy Director General Technical from the ASA. I just wanted to bring your attention to the actual data from the Infrastructure and Projects Authority that underpin the report, as the Director General has said, dated to the 31st of March 2024. Against their specific conclusion, they quoted in the spreadsheet that the Infrastructure and Projects Authority Delivery Confidence Assessment rating at 2023-2024 remains at red. This is primarily due to the following factors: ongoing challenges associated with achieving the required delivery date of the first Dreadnought submarine nuclear core, and the importance of that milestone to sustaining the continuous sea deterrent. The programme is working closely with the supplier to address the risks involved to ensure core delivery remains aligned to Dreadnought Boat 1 delivery progress, while delivering the last core of the Astute class of submarine. So specifically against that particular milestone. They also stated that the project's end date remains scheduled to finish on the 30th of April 2028. This will need to be revised to reflect scope changes later this year as a result of core requirements for AUKUS. The revised scope will likely be approved in mid-2024, and that was the basis at which it got the red conclusion. So that's from the IPA report itself.
Indeed, I've read that. Thanks, Mr Hodgson.
Thank you.
You see, Vice Admiral Mead, the problem you face is when you look at this report, the core production capability has been rated as appears to be unachievable, and the overall viability of needing to be reassessed, not just in January of this year. It was the same rating in January of last year, and I assume that was before we made the payment of another 140 million, but I could be wrong. But also the same rating in January of 2023. And yet 2 months after this report was delivered in January of 2023, saying that this core element of the AUKUS, of what is now the AUKUS project, is unachievable, that's when the optimal delivery pathway was entered into. Did consideration of the optimal delivery pathway include consideration of the opinion of the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, which the actual nuclear core of the AUKUS submarines is probably not viable and unachievable? Was that considered in the optimal pathway?
So I think Mr Hodgson answered that question there, Senator. It was a very specific reference to Dreadnought Core 1. We are talking about the SSN cores. We have been to the facilities there. We have seen the master plan to increase the production of the cores at Rolls-Royce. Money has been injected into Rolls-Royce to increase the production line for the reactors, and that we will see that play out in the next couple of years. We do not need a core immediately.
And I think, Senator, the thing is that you've been informed on a number of occasions now by Admiral Mead about the investments that are taking place to to ensure that the capability is available. Now, we accept that this is complex, we accept that it is technical, but we do have confidence in the UK. Like, this is a project with long delivery times, and we are working closely with our partners and providing additional resources to ensure that those delivery timetables can be met.
Well, I'm sure, Vice Admiral Mead, when you spoke about this being high risk, I'm sure you had in your mind these problems with the core production facility. Was that part of what you had in mind, Vice Admiral, when you were talking about it being high risk?
So there are a number of factors that may have high risk, and we always knew that Rolls-Royce would need to increase their production. They generate generally one core every 3 years for their own submarines, and for SSN AUKUS, and us having our own program requiring cores would mean that they would need to increase their production. Hence why we have invested in an uplift in the Rolls-Royce facility, as has the UK. That does not translate into immediate overnight changes to the thing. A build of the new production will take a number of years, okay, and so we'll see this eventually play out in the grades and the assessments of Rolls-Royce. We do not need the core immediately, but that money is going into, including from Australia, has already gone into it.
Senator Beveridge, can I just add Alex Kelton, Acting Deputy Director General Program and Policy, to Vice Admiral Mead's point earlier. In direct response to the release of this report at diplomatic levels to our High Commission in London, we received assurances from the UK government that the SSN AUKUS program is not affected by this.
Well, you see, again, the problem with that assurance from whoever you got it with in the UK government is contrary to the position of the Independent Infrastructure and Projects Authority, which says the work for the deterrent submarine fleet, which is the dreadnought fleet, is an essential prerequisite for building the sovereign capability to manufacture further cores. You can't just pretend they're unrelated. The IPA says getting the dreadnought stuff sorted is the essential prerequisite for the industrial base to build the next set of nuclear cores for the AUKUS project. And did they explain how the IPA was wrong in that conclusion?
Senator, your questions are unresponsive to the information that has been provided to you repeatedly now by officials, which is that there is an uplift in capability underway as a consequence of significant injections of funding provided by both the UK government and the Australian government. The report that is before you doesn't deal with that uplift. It deals with an assessment about the Dreadnought project, as Mr Hodgson had clarified for you earlier. And so I understand your desire to ask the officials this same question repeatedly until they eventually agree with you. But they keep providing you information contrary to your narrative, and you don't accept it. And I'm not sure we're going to be able to go very much further on that basis.
I don't expect the ASA to agree with me, but when the independent report from the IPA expressly references the unachievability of the sovereign capability to manufacture further cores for a fleet of flexible and adaptable attack submarines delivered under the AUKUS agreement, I think they're talking about the AUKUS project. You may disagree, but I think they're talking about the AUKUS project. And can you explain how you say that doesn't apply to the AUKUS project?
So what I say, Senator, is that this report was made with effect of 31st of March 2024. That's when the data was brought together and they formed that conclusion. Since that time, we've had the Australian money go in just beforehand. That will take some time to wash through the system in order to build this second production facility. We have further money going into the UK Rolls-Royce in order to uplift, and the UK themselves have invested over $12 billion in the last couple of months into the Rolls-Royce facility in order to uplift and produce this second production line in order to de-risk their SSN AUKUS and our SSN AUKUS.
Yeah, but you see, Vice Admiral Mead, you just admitted earlier that despite that schedule of payments, you're expecting yet another red rating when this is delivered next year, which will again say the project appears to be unachievable and its overall viability needs to be reassessed. You can't have it both ways.
So what I'm saying is that if you're going to inject $12 billion into an infrastructure program, you will not see results
I'd
overnight.
hope to see results.
It will take some time for those facilities to be built. Right. So if there is a red rating that comes in 12 months' time, I'm sure that we will see in part of the narrative there the significant investment that the UK and Australia has made into the Rolls-Royce facility.
So will you provide on notice the detailed schedule of payments, additional payments that you say have been promised and or made by the UK government and or Australia since the 31st of March 2024?
So I can provide you obviously the future Australian uplift payments, and we've already taken that on notice. We do have on the record the exact dates of September and January of when the UK went into contract with Rolls-Royce with the additional money. I don't have visibility of future UK payments into Rolls-Royce.
Will you provide what you know on notice, including dollar figures?
Yeah,
and
yes.
Also, yes. But you, again, Vice Admiral Mead, you said that there'd been no slippage, no concerns raised since we last spoke about the US part of AUKUS Pillar 1 too. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
Yeah, well, on the...
Pillar 1, I don't deal with Pillar 2.
Well, I thought I said Pillar 1.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said Pillar 2 as well.
Well, if I did, I meant Pillar 1. On the 11th of February, like 3 weeks after the IPA produced its report, the Congressional Research Service of the US Congress produced its updated report on the Navy Virginia-class submarine program and AUKUS submarine Pillar 1 project. That delivered more bad news, didn't it?
The Congressional Program Office always produces reports for information to the Congress. It is not a definitive document, it's more an academic document. The US was very specific when they said, and briefed us beforehand last year, that they were investing, I think, $17 billion US into the US submarine industrial base in order to do their own uplift, very similar to what the UK has done.
Right.
And Ms Kelton, she may want to... So they too have done their own uplift into the SIB, and we are investing into the US SIB, as you know. We just gave them $500 million recently.
500 million US?
$500 million US.
But you see, what the Congressional Research Service said, almost contemporaneous with us tipping in 800 million Australian dollars, wasn't, I'm just reading from page 15 of report, Virginia-class boats have been procured at a rate of 2 boats per year, but the actual Virginia-class production rate has never reached 2 boats per year. And since 2022 has been limited by shipyard and supplier firm workforce and supply chain challenges to about 1.2 boats per year, resulting in a growing backlog of boats procured but not yet built. They then go to speak about the impact of the AUKUS promises and the fact that there'd been some additional funding. I think you referred to the additional funding. And they conclude with this: whether this effort will succeed in increasing the Virginia-class production rate to 2 boats per year by 2028 and subsequently to 2.33 boats per year needed for the AUKUS is not clear. So we've got the UK reactor project in meltdown, and we have the US producing roughly half the number of boats needed, Virginia-class boats needed, to provide any surplus for Australia. These reports were in January and February of this year. Do you stick by your evidence that no fresh concerns have been raised?
Affirmative, Senator, and I do not agree with the characterisation of the UK program either. As I said, this $17 billion that the US is investing in the SIB will take some time to flow through. I mentioned in my opening statements that we are not only investing money, but we are investing Australian companies, we are uplifting Australian companies so they can feed into the US supply chain. We have a number of companies in contract. This is good for Australia. This is good for small Australian companies. This is good for the US submarine industrial base. This is good for Australia's national security.
But the problem is
I can have someone here that can give further updates on that, but we're very proud of the DivQ program.
they're not producing the boats needed, are they? They're about half of those needed to make any surplus for delivery to Australia. Again, before you signed the cheque or delivered the funds, the $800 million funds, did you consider if it was actually achievable?
So we considered that the US Navy had given us assurances that they were going to transfer the Virginias to us, and we also considered that they, late last year, had invested $17 billion US into the SIB specifically to uplift the program, to increase the production rate in order to get more submarines out.
Well, you know that one of the challenges you face in getting any surplus Virginia-class submarines is the fact that the US has made it clear that the priority for their industrial base and the priority for the increase of any production of nuclear submarines is actually going to go to the Columbia-class submarines, vastly bigger and more complex submarines than the Virginia-class submarines. And that in addition to Virginia-class submarines of 2.33 a year, they have to also churn out from the same industrial base the Columbia-class submarines at the rate of 1 per year. That's where the $17 billion is going into, isn't it?
Not all of it, Senator. That's not correct. It's a poor characterisation.
How am I wrong?
The $17 billion is not directly going straight into the Columbia program. What I can also tell you is the US continues to give us assurances the transfer of the Virginias are on track.
Well,
all right. Last minute to Senator Shoebridge.
You see, the problem with an assurance, you've got an assurance from the UK that's directly contrary to the considered independent report from their own Infrastructure Projects Authority. You've got an assurance from the United States that is directly contrary to the decades and decades of experience that informs the Congressional Research Service report, another independent report. On one hand, we have evidence, and on the other hand, we have bare assurances. How should the Australian public take any comfort from your assurances?
So I've tried to emphasise a number of times, Senator. First of all, with the UK, you're reading data which is old. It's data with effect 1st of March 24, and there has been a significant injection of funds in order to develop a second production line for Rolls-Royce. With the US, they've only very recently injected that money into the US SIB, and that will take a little bit of time to wash through workforce, supply chain. We too are investing in the US SIB, not just in money, but in small Australian companies that are building valves. I went there recently with the Deputy Prime Minister to see HI Fraser build the valves. They build valves for Collins. They're now in the point that Electric Boat and Huntington Inglis are going to inspect the prototypes of the valves that they've been asked to develop for US Virginia-class submarines. This is a tremendous success story, Senator.
Yeah. All right. Look, we need to move on. We are significantly behind, and I do know we need to get to the Department of Veterans Affairs. If senators have an ability to put their questions on notice or write and submit their questions to the department, so to ASA, but we do need to move on to our next witness. So
I have some questions I can't put on notice.
All right, but we'll have to suspend. So we'll suspend now. We'll have a private meeting of the committee. Thanks. All right, welcome back, everyone. Okay, so next 15 minutes, Senator Shoebridge, you've got the call, and then ASA, you'll be free to go home. Just to let the War Memorial know that you have also been released from this evening. I'm sure they'll be very pleased with that. All right, Senator Shoebridge.
Vice Admiral Mead, can you provide details of the number of overseas visits/travel that's been undertaken by ASA staff that have used business class fares?
Is this over a specific time period?
Over this financial year?
I'd have to take that on notice. I couldn't tell you.
Is there a policy that all overseas travel is taken on business class?
The policy that we use is in accordance with the Department of Defence and I think in accordance with Department of Finance guidelines, and that we stick rigidly within those rules.
So is all overseas travel by business class? Is that what's happened? Ms Higgins?
Senator Samantha Higgins, Chief Operating Officer at the ASA. In general, business travel is conducted overseas by business class. However, there are some instances, such as for training and exercises and attending operations, where some staff will travel economy.
All right. So in general, it's business. And what's the basis of that decision?
We are following defence travel policy.
Could you identify the defence travel policy that you're referring to?
I will have to take that one on notice.
All right. Ms Higgins, you're probably not in a position now to provide details of each trip and whether they were business or economy, but I assume you have to keep those records.
Yes, we'd have to take that sort of
Could-
detail on notice.
Could you provide them and then also put the cost of travel of all the international travel flights and the dates?
Yep.
Yep. Has the travel budget largely been expended for this year? Have there been any fresh directions given in relation, say, for domestic travel because of the expenditure of the travel budget?
No, I'd say we're probably, where we are in the year, tracking towards our annual budget as an agency that we set at the beginning of our of 24-25.
So there's no additional approvals required for staff for travel?
Well, there is a very rigorous approval process that needs to be undertaken to travel overseas, including senior officer delegation and sign-off on the travel. And there needs to be a business case put forward in all overseas travel. It needs to be justified. There needs to be a travel program in there. There needs to be outcomes that you're looking for. All that goes to the delegate, who then makes a determination whether they approve or disapprove the overseas travel. That would include whether it's going business or economy class.
Well, have there been any fresh directions, memos, whatever, given in relation to domestic travel in this financial year? Any additional approvals required?
So, Senator, we have asked people to consider the requirement for travel, like Defence has done. They have asked people to look very carefully at the requirements to travel at all, and whether we can look at whether the numbers of people that were planning to attend a particular event all need to attend, or if we can bring that cost down.
When did you require that additional consideration?
I actually think that additional consideration has been in our policy. You know, the need, the requirement to do travel, whether it could be conducted by other means, or if, you know, the size of the travelling party is required for business needs. So I don't think that's a new policy. It's always been the perspective that we've taken, and as a Section 23 delegate under the PGPA Act would take, to deem that the expenditure on travel is efficient, effective, ethical and economical.
So do I take it from your evidence that there have been no additional approvals required in relation to domestic travel this financial year?
Senator, if I may, Mr Tim Hodgson, Deputy Director General Technical, Given the wide distribution of my team, both in Melbourne, Adelaide, Western Australia and Canberra primarily, I have requested my teams to seek approval before travelling domestically in groups to attend meetings when they can be done by other purposes. That is just done by the basis of an email to justify that, and it's just an additional means of managing the travel budget.
So when did you send that email, Mr. Hodgson?
I have to take an exact date on notice, I'm afraid.
And what triggered it?
Just the need to manage our budget as we were looking forward to significant engagement in the design review process for SSN AUKUS as we move forward. We need to make sure that we can prioritise the budget accordingly.
All right. At the time you sent your email, had your travel budget come under particular pressure?
Not under pressure, but I think we were looking ahead and forecasting the demand in the future was going to exceed if we didn't manage the budget more effectively. So that is all about making sure that we prioritised accordingly.
And so were there...
We have no desire to spend 24 hours in an aircraft travelling to Washington or to London. The vast majority of work that we do is via VTC with US and UK. I think I did over a dozen VTCs with US people this week, all different hours. There are some meetings where we all get together that are done face to face, and there are some places that we go to that we need to actually talk to the people and visually see the facilities themselves, because they are similar facilities that we're going to build in Australia.
Ms Higgins, I assume not only do you keep records of the flight costs, you also would keep records of the total cost for each of these trips, is that right?
Including allowances and
accommodation.
Yes, yeah.
Could you also provide that on notice as well for the trips this financial year?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, Senator, is that for all travel for every employee in this organisation?
I asked for international travel. That's what we're talking about, Ms Higgins.
I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah, it's the same data set I'm asking about. Yeah.
For the financial year, Senator.
Yes.
Yes.
Vice Admiral Mead, you would have seen the concerns raised by the ASIO Director General about efforts for espionage directed at the AUKUS project. Did you see those comments?
Yes, Senator.
And the need for extreme vigilance for the protection of sensitive information related to the AUKUS projects?
Yes, Senator.
Has there been any breaches of security for sensitive documents by the ASA?
I'm not aware of any, but I'll hand over to the Deputy Director General Technical, whose area security comes under him, but I'm not aware of any.
All right. Well, I've had very real concerns raised about a thing called Foldergate, and some details about Foldergate, about a folder of top secret documents that were left on a flight.
I can categorically refute any top secret documents being left on the flight, Senator.
Any secure documents being left on a flight and then having to be recovered afterwards? Has that
Take
happened?
that on notice, please, Senator.
Well, is there concerns about a thing called Foldergate, about
I've never
secure documents being left on a flight? I think it might have been a flight back from the US to Australia. Does this ring a bell?
I'll take that on notice, please, Senator.
Well, are you aware of secure documents being left on a flight?
I've taken the issue on notice, Senator, please.
Were you aware of officials being called by Qantas to have to come and secure documents that have been left on a flight? Are you aware of that
the
happening?
witnesses already provide you an answer to that.
Are you aware of that happening? Does that trigger a bell, Mr. Hodgson?
The witnesses already provide you with an answer.
Vice Admiral, have concerns been raised with you about secure documents having been left on an aircraft, a commercial aircraft?
I'm not aware of that, but I need to take that on notice.
All right. if such a thing had happened, Vice Admiral Mead, you would expect to be notified about it, wouldn't you?
Depending on the level of the breach and the type of documents that were involved.
Ms Hodgson, is that your area of expertise? Is that your area of responsibility within the organisation?
I look after security as well as technical aspects, yes.
All right. Well, have any incidents like that been brought to your attention?
I beg your pardon?
Have any incidents of that nature been brought to your attention?
I'll take that on notice.
I'm certainly not aware of any top secret documents being left lying around. We have a very rigorous process in the ASA on material of that type.
Well, are you aware of any AUKUS-related documents that were confidential being left on a flight?
I'll take that on
And that's what
notice.
you've also taken on notice, Mr
This question has
Hodgson?
been asked
It
about
has.
5 times
It
now, and
has.
on each occasion it's
The,
been dealt with in the
You've
same way.
got 2 minutes left, Senator Shoebridge.
What are the... Has anyone faced any disciplinary action for having breached confidentiality requirements? Ms Hodgson?
Coming from him.
I'm going to take that one on notice as well, just to check.
All right. I look forward to the answers. Thanks, you.
Thank you. On that note, thank you very much, Vice Admiral, to you and the team.
Thank you, Chair.
We'll see you next time.
Looking forward to it.
Have a good night. All right, on that note, we'll suspend very briefly and we'll have our next witnesses being the Australian Signal Directorate. Okay. All right. Welcome back, everyone. And I now like to welcome Abigail Bradshaw, CSC Director General of the Australian Signals Directorate. Good evening, DG. How are you and your team?
Really well,
Thank you. Good. Now, do you happen to have an opening statement? Because if you do, would you be able to table it for us so we can get straight to questions?
I do not have it.
Oh, fantastic. All right.
Table, Senator.
Well, on that note, I'm going to hand over the call to Senator Patterson, who has some questions for you.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry for keeping you waiting, Director General, and I hope not to detain you for too long this evening. Just a couple of quick questions. You might have seen, or you might be aware, the Department of Home Affairs, in response to questions I asked them on Monday, disclosed that ASD had briefed the Minister for Home Affairs about the national security risks associated with Chinese-made electric vehicles. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator, it is. I don't believe this microphone's working.
It's working.
Not very well. It's a bit soft, but yes, thank you. And did you just brief him in a generic sense about the risks of Chinese-made electric vehicles, or specifically about his own personal vehicle?
Both, Senator.
Okay. What mitigation advice did you offer the Minister for Home Affairs to protect him from any risks that vehicle poses?
Senator, the advice which we provided to the Minister is consistent with the advice that's available to the public on cyber.gov.au and contained in our advisory titled Tips to Secure Your IoT Device, which was first published in 2020 and republished in an updated version in 2023, and a variety of other advisories that are available. They include measures such as applying regular updates to ensure that software is updated and patched, turning off unnecessary features. So, in other words, minimising the level of telemetry which is shared and the accessibility of telemetry accessing applications within the vehicle. And of course, in a non-technical sense, minimising the extent to which sensitive information is shared both on devices but also verbally whilst in the vehicle.
So those are what you would call mitigations, things which reduce the risk. Wouldn't it be better just to remove the risk by not using a Chinese-made electric vehicle?
Senator, the ASD's role is not to prohibit the use or regulate or rule out or provide policy advice on accessibility to devices or technology, but rather to give an outline of the risks which are associated with various technologies and the extent to which those can be mitigated. Whether they are ruled out is a matter for policy and regulatory agencies, and on a personal matter, it is a risk which we hope that the user in an informed way engages with.
Yes, you are right. Ironically, your role is technical advice. That's appropriate. It's Home Affairs' role to make policy decisions, and that's the irony of this situation we find ourselves in because of the Minister's personal decisions. Did you advise the Minister about whether or not it's advisable to connect either his work device or any personal devices to the vehicle?
Senator, we would have provided advice as to the risks associated with connecting any IoT device to the vehicle. I would have to take on notice whether we made a distinction between personal and work devices. So I would need to take that on notice, but my sense is that those distinctions would have been made, and the nature of a issued device would by definition include government or sensitive or classified information.
Yes, obviously a work device is going to be more sensitive than a personal device, particularly if you're the Minister for Home Affairs and Cybersecurity. But is it the case that a foreign intelligence agency might be interested in information that's stored on the personal device of a senior politician?
Yes, Senator, and by sensitive information, I refer in the way that DG Burgess did yesterday, both to classified material, which should absolutely not be connected, but sensitive in the sense that any information which is private or personal or could be used for leverage should be limited and confined in terms of devices, and that was the nature of the advice which we gave.
Yes, and obviously the reason why you wouldn't want to make that material available to a foreign intelligence agency is that they could use that as part of an intelligence strategy. They could use that to coerce someone, for example.
Yes, Senator.
What has your advice been to the Minister more broadly about the risks posed to other Australians by connected vehicles like these?
Senator, our advice has been consistent with that contained in the public-facing documentation, which is contained in those advisories. As I mentioned, tips to secure your IoT device, identifying cyber supply chain risks, and cyber supply chain risk management. All of those advisories were updated last year. They outlined the key risks associated with IoT devices, that is data collection, surveillance and service disruption, and the mitigations which can be used to minimise those risks.
And is it ASD's view that vendors from some countries, like China, where they are subject to the national security and national intelligence laws of those countries, pose a different level of risk than vendors from, say, a rule of law democracy?
Yes, Senator, and in the advisories which we have published on supply chain risks, the operation of domestic laws from the originating country are set out as plainly as you have described.
And that's why the Australian government, over successive governments on a bipartisan basis, has uniquely decided to ban either from critical infrastructure, vendors like Huawei or ZTE, or software programs like TikTok or most recently DeepSeek, because of the unique risk that those vendors pose.
Yes, Senator. To be clear, in relation to the latter two applications, that is DeepSeek and TikTok, in which I am explicitly aware of the advice that ASD gave in relation to those two applications, our concern was data security primarily, and access to that by other jurisdictions.
Yes, yes. Hence why they've been banned on government devices. For any individual contemplating their own privacy and security, can you fully mitigate a risk from using a Chinese-made connected vehicle?
No, you cannot fully mitigate the risks of any device which is connected to the internet, to my knowledge.
Yeah, we could all just walk around and without electronic devices if we want to be really safe, but that's obviously not the real world. But you could reduce the risk if you move from, say, a Chinese-made EV to a non-Chinese-made EV.
Well, Senator, the risks are still there in terms of connectivity.
Yes. Yes, but your earlier answer explained that some vendors are higher risk than others because of their relationship with foreign governments and the policies of those foreign governments, and that includes China.
That's right, Senator.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I want to move on quickly to another matter. Has ASD been involved in investigating in any way the purported hack to the WhatsApp account or device of the member for Tangney, Mr Sam Lim?
No, Senator.
No, it hasn't been referred to you?
No, Senator, but I am aware of the case.
Yep. And what are the facts as you understand them about the case?
So I'm aware of media reporting around the operation of the WhatsApp application on a mobile device. I'm also aware, having heard also the evidence of the DPS officer on Monday, that DPS, as both the network owner and the device owner, has taken steps including refreshing the device, and that is consistent with their responsibilities as both the device owner and network owner, and that is my level of awareness, and to be honest, I'm content with those steps. It's consistent with their responsibilities.
ASD has previously been brought in directly, though, when the devices of parliamentarians has been targeted, hasn't it?
We have been engaged on giving advice on targeting of parliamentarians.
Yes, in fact, and it's already on the public domain, so I'm not disclosing anything that's sensitive here, but you provided advice to parliamentarians, including myself, about the fact that we were targeted by an actor which is believed to be acting on behalf of the Chinese government, and on a bipartisan basis a range of MPs were targeted, and ASD appropriately took that very seriously. Why wouldn't ASD be involved in this instance if it is true that Mr Lim's phone has been hacked and someone has sent a message on his behalf that he did not author?
Well, Senator, I'm aware that the matter has, that the AFP have been engaged on the matter. And I'm also satisfied that as DPS own the device and the network, which it may or may not be connected to, that they have a level of competence to seek further advice from us if they are not satisfied that the matter's been dealt with within their own security and technical capability.
Okay, and just to confirm, the AFP haven't sought any technical assistance from you either?
No, Senator.
And to your knowledge, the AFP has not investigated any person in relation to this matter?
Not to my knowledge, Senator.
And AFP has not charged any person in relation to this matter?
Not to my knowledge, Senator.
Thank you. Given the time, Chair, I can probably leave it there.
Thank you very much, Senator. On that note, thank you very much to ASD.
Chair, may I just mention that whilst it is my first night as DG here with you, and I'm grateful that it's been so quick, I did want to acknowledge Ms Rachel Noble, who was the Director General for 5 years and an incredible public servant for 30. ASD and many government agencies owe a lot to her legacy, and I would like to put that on record if I may.
Indeed, and I think it goes without saying, I think we also share what you've said, and if she is watching, I don't know why you...
She is.
Yeah, hello Rachel, go to bed. But no, thank you for your service to the country, because it's one of those thankless tasks that, you know, quite frankly, a lot of people in Australia would not appreciate, I guess, the work that her and her team, including people like you, do every single day to protect us. So thank you very much. Well, on that note, we'll now get ready with our next witness, being the Defence Housing Australia. We'll suspend and welcome DHA very soon. All right, welcome back everyone. I'd now like to welcome Defence Housing Australia. Good evening, Managing Director. How are you?
Good evening. Very well.
Now, did you bring along an opening statement for tonight?
No, I don't have an opening statement.
Excellent. All right. Senator Fawcett has some questions for you. Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Jaggers, good evening to you and your team.
Thank you.
DHA obviously works with service housing for families. My understanding is that you also provide a booking service for on-base accommodation and for off-base commercially acquired accommodation for singles or unaccompanied people?
Yes, Senator. So DHA does provide support to Defence for with its living in accommodation program, so we do the booking system in relation to that. We also provide assistance to Defence by administering their rental assistance program and dealing with members in relation to those entitlements.
That's all I need for now,
okay,
just to establish that you have a role in that, because
yes.
I want to come to some media reporting published in Townsville earlier this year
yes.
About soldiers who were evicted from accommodation to make room for new personnel. The media report didn't give a lot of background to that, but I'm just wanting to know, was that a decision of Defence, or was that a role that you as DHA had a role in managing that accommodation, issuing eviction notices, etc.? Do you have any information you could share with the committee around what happened there?
Senator, so we administer the booking arrangements, but I've seen the report in the newspapers in Townsville, but certainly, as I understand it, we haven't had a role in evicting people from defence bases. That's not the sort of service we provide.
So is it your evidence to the committee that DHA had no role in what was reported in the papers in Townsville?
Yeah, I'll ask Mr. Jorgensen to add and Mr. West to add, but certainly there were newspaper articles, but we can maybe provide some more factual information in relation to what we are actually doing in Townsville.
Well, I think just we can provide more factual information about what is happening in Townsville, but I think on this particular matter, as I understand it, DHA is responsible in the provision of off-site accommodation. They are not responsible for on-base accommodation and the provision of and the availability of that, and this is a matter for defence policy.
So my understanding is that DHA do the booking service for on-base accommodation?
But I think the access to that is a matter for defence.
Sure, that's a policy decision for defence, but what I'm asking is, were DHA involved even in a post office type role in that whole process?
Brett Jorgensen, General Manager, Service Delivery in Defence Housing Australia. Thanks, Senator. Maybe I can just explain a little bit about the booking system and how that relates to a member that isn't able to get accommodation on base.
Well, perhaps can we come to the core of my question first? If DHA had no role, even just as a manager of the accommodation in Townsville, then we can move on because we're short of time tonight.
Defence does make the decision on whether a member is required to vacate a property on a unit on base. Yes, that is right. Not DHA.
Sure. So they make the decision, but my question for the fourth time is, were you involved in the administration, the implementation of that decision that was made by Defence?
No, DHA is not involved in the work with the member on vacating. Having said that, DHA would have been responsible for administering the contribution for the member ending if they were already living in accommodation, but not the process of vacating.
Okay. So if you're the one who allocates the room to them, gives them the key, etc., are you also the one who issues them with a notice to depart from the room by a certain date?
No, Senator, we don't issue the key. We provide a booking service, an online booking service, supported by a contact centre to help people book accommodation when it's available in line with Defence's advice.
Sure, okay. So in this case, once Defence had made the decision for them to leave, my understanding is that DHA is also responsible to provide a service to assist with off-base accommodation for single people who have been entitled to accommodation?
Yes, Senator, we do administer where a single member or a family are looking for rental accommodation. When they rent privately, we administer the rent allowance on Defence's behalf.
So in a case like this, where Defence makes the decision to remove people from a base for whatever reason, and those people have been relying on the Defence accommodation, what systems does DHA have to prioritise the support for those members, and what flexibility do you have to engage with landlords in the private sector around rates and rents and other things?
Yes, DHA can assist members with both the RA rental allowance process as well as access to our system to look if there's a property that they could select from DHA. If it's a single member, we do have some housing, member choice accommodation housing available in our portfolio. That single member could log on to our online services. They could have a look at what housing is available in the area.
I'm aware of the in general principle. What happened in Townsville?
Senator, I'd have to take that one on notice. I'm not familiar with the detail of what that individual person or people may have done.
Well, according to reports, it was more than one person and it caused a significant ruction amongst the community there. Mr Jaggers, you said you'd read the reports.
I've
Can
read
you inform the
reports
committee as to whether DHA was proactive and involved in assisting to find alternate accommodation?
Senator, I think we've taken that on notice and we'll come back to you. We'll also talk to Defence about it as well.
Is there anything in your knowledge
details.
now that you can tell the committee?
Well,
because it's a very good...
Sorry, Senator. I think the official's taken it on notice, and the reason, I have a number of reasons for insisting that he be allowed to do so. I think the first is that officials have been fairly clear that they would prefer to get the facts straight before they provide evidence to the Senate, and I think that's quite reasonable. They would prefer to gain the information. The second is that, well, I don't actually have personal knowledge of the circumstances you describe, but we're obviously always cautious about discussing individual cases in an open forum, and it may be useful for officials to just have a look at the circumstances and weigh what information can be responsibly provided in response to your question. I don't dispute that it is a question. It sounds as though it is a question that is valid and important. I'm not trying to say that officials shouldn't answer it, but they have asked to be able to take it on notice and to have a look and gather the information so they could answer it accurately.
So, Minister, my
responsibly.
concern with that is that if we were sitting here at the end of last year and we had months ahead of us, but there's a very good chance that your leader will go to the Governor-General very soon and call an election.
Senator, I'm not
confirming
confirming
all I'm
that.
asking is, and this is normal practice, whatever is in the knowledge of Mr Jaggers, can you inform the committee? If there's things you are uncertain of, facts you don't have to hand, that's fine. But what you do know, because you've said you have read the reports, what role did DHA have in trying to assist those members?
So, Senator, to clarify, I've read media reports on the weekend in relation to accommodation at Townsville. I have no specific knowledge of what happened in relation to alleged evictions of people on base, and so we've taken it on notice and we'll come back to you with the
Can I
response.
move on then to understand more broadly what the satisfaction rate of Defence members is in respect to toll in particular, who I understand is a provider that you use to coordinate and effect removals for families. I've had reports of dissatisfaction about housing shortages in area, which is a DHA problem, homes that are uninhabitable due to maintenance issues, people turning up and having last-minute cancellations of houses that they had been told would be there. So I'm interested to know, do you collect stats on how often those incidents occur? And if so, can you provide the committee with an indication of how frequent these sorts of events are?
Senator, I can address a number of those questions.
Can you get a bit closer to the microphone? You're very...
Sorry, Senator. Yes, Brett Jorgensen, General Manager, Service Delivery, Defence Housing Australia. DHA does do a number of different surveys with Defence members at various points throughout all of the services that we do. They're based on a poll with members who undertake or are involved in the various services, and we can go through, I'll bring it up on my computer in a second, we can go through the satisfaction levels for maintenance for houses being provided on the dates that a member has locked them down, as well as availability of housing. So generally those satisfaction ratings are quite high. They're in the 90 to 95% range.
Mm-hmm. In terms of your survey results, given that you have that on your computer, could I ask that you provide that to the Secretariat after the hearing or tomorrow, as opposed to the normal 2 or 3 weeks that you would get?
It's in a range of reports. If we took it on notice, we could pull out that information specifically for the committee.
Yes, but I think you've heard my discussion with the Minister. We have a fairly limited time frame probably to understand that. So in addition to your surveys, do you have a complaints mechanism where somebody who is dissatisfied with the provision of a home can register a complaint with you? And if so, how many complaints do you get of the nature of last-minute cancellations or houses that are not suitable?
Once again, we do, Senator, have a complaints process and complaint reporting through to the Department of Defence. I should be able to access that as well. The number of complaints overall is quite low compared to the number of the portfolio that we have. And the instance that you have identified, a house not being available, I can't recall many complaints along those lines at all, in fact.
Okay, well,
but
if you
again,
can add that to the
look at that in
information
detail.
you take on notice, that would be useful.
Yes.
And my final question, because the Chair is winding me up here, is what KPIs do you set for Toll and how do you measure their performance and assure yourself that they are providing the standard of service that they are contracted to?
Senator, the contract with Toll Transitions is directly with Department of Defence. It's not with DHA. We obviously work in, we coordinate with Toll through the services that we provide in Defence Housing Australia, but the contract is with Defence and they manage that.
In that case, I will take it up to the next available opportunity with Defence. Thank you.
Thanks,
Chair.
Senator. Thanks, DHA. You are released. Have a good night. We'll now get ready with the Department of Veterans Affairs. We'll suspend. All right, I now welcome Ms Alison Frame, Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs and Officers of the Department. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair.
Did you have an opening statement?
I do, Senator, but I'm happy at this point to table that in the interest of time.
All right, if we can have you provide us with a copy, we'll get that circulated. Oh, we got copies. Excellent. We'll get that circulated to senators.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass the call over to Senator Davey to kick off with questions.
Certainly. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Ms Frame, for attending again. It was about a year ago that you announced that unallocated claims, that the backlog had been cleared. It was February 2024, the end of February 2024. Yes. So we should be having cake, but instead we're all here. However, in the absence of seeing your opening statement, the only thing I've got to go on is your annual reports and the claims data that's in there. And I'm just wanting to check, because there have been certain statements in made on public networks, things like there's a lot of smoke and mirrors about the backlogs of claims, and we've talked about it in the past as to whether they're truly been cleared or they've just been moved from one pile to another. Your annual report, which I accept is now 6 months out of date because it says the claims on hand for permanent impairment had actually increased between 2022-23 to 23-24 from 12,387 to 18,477. And similarly, the number of claims on hand for MERCA were 10,476 in 22-23 and 12,876 in 23-24. Can you give us the latest figures for claims on hand and assure us that they're not just moved from... So we've dealt with them, we've gone through the triage process and now they're sitting in another pile?
I can, Senator, I can explain all those numbers. Firstly, I'd start by just making the point, and I know I have talked the committee through this in the past, to explain that the backlog that the Royal Commission referred to in their interim report, the unallocated claims backlog, was addressed, as you know, in February last year when I announced that that had been cleared. What that meant is that all those claims had been allocated to people in the department to look at, where previously they had not even been considered. So they were unallocated and they were not actively being considered. And at the point we met that Royal Commission deadline a month ahead of time, they were all actively being considered. And I've continued to update the committee over regular Senate estimates about how many of that number, which was about 41,000 something, it was low 40,000s, how many of that number had actually been determined. And it was always high, Senator, and as at today, it is 98% of that number of claims that have actually been fully determined, claim decided, out the door. There's a small percentage that are just obviously more complicated claims, but a very small percentage of that 41,000 that are not actually fully determined. What's important, Senator, is that claims that are on hand...
clarify that 98% fully determined...
Yes. Of the Royal Commission backlog.
Yes, so it's 98% of that backlog.
Yes.
Yes,
I'm moving on to the next part.
You've always got new claims coming
Always,
in.
and that's you've just made that point for me, Senator. That's right. That's what I was going to move on to say. There are always new claims coming in, and the claim rates, you know, the rates at which claims are coming into the department is increasing year on year on year. It's compounding, and we've had really significant growth in the year 22-23 and then 23-24. So such that it has been enormously higher numbers of claims coming in. So when you talk about claims on hand, they reflect claims that have come into the department, and many of those claims are very new. And we're actually able to demonstrate with any numbers we can take you through tonight, Senator, if you'd like more detail of the numbers, that the stock of claims on hand in DVA are demonstrably, and in line with the numbers we post on the internet as well when we provide those regular updates, are newer claims. There are a significant proportion of much newer claims in that total number of claims on hand. And as I've said as well in the past, Senator, we don't measure our success by how many claims are on hand, in that we don't seek to discourage veterans from lodging their claims. If there are more claims coming in, that is a function of veterans having confidence in the system, recognising that their claims will be determined. There is a prospect of a decision, and we're seeing that increasing number of claims come in. What all our metrics pertain to is how quickly are we processing those claims. That is where we focus all our energy and efforts, is how quickly are we addressing those claims. And I have some numbers I can provide for you, Senator, if you'd like more about the processing times, but I just would make the point that for MERCA IL claims, which is our biggest category of claims coming in, for claims received under MERCA IL in the last year, since 1 January 2024, the average time taken to process those claims is approximately 100 days, which is a really significant reduction in what those average processing times have been. There's still some other averaging processing times that I could give you that reflect the stock of claims that we are still working through, and they will be longer, time taken to process. But for MERCA IL claims received since 1 January last year, it's demonstrating that the system is moving faster and those newer claims are being addressed.
As briefly as possible, because we have spoken before about your success measurement is the KPI. Are you meeting the KPIs for the length of time it takes to deal with claims? So just quickly, are you meeting those KPIs?
No, Senator, not the KPIs that are in the ANAO, our key performance measures with the Audit Office. No, Senator, and that's, I remember a lengthy exchange at the last Senate estimates about that. And I did point out to Senator Shoebridge, it was at that point, that there were elements of those metrics that we were meeting in the current financial year. We're obviously looking at the previous financial year.
Yes.
But I don't have all that data available with me at the moment, but we're still not, I would not purport that we're meeting all those metrics, but every measure of timeliness is improving, Senator, that is true.
Can you provide the committee on notice your most recent available report of your achievements against those KPIs? Because I'm sure you track it regularly, and so the most recent report you've had about your whether you're achieving those KPIs, can you provide that on notice?
I just confirmed. Quarterly. Okay. Yes, Senator. I've just confirmed we do track that on a quarterly basis, so it will be a report as at the end of the last calendar year.
That's fine, and I don't expect you to write a special report just for us. But the most recent one would be good. Moving on, I've just got a query about in the MyEFO there was an allocation of 1.8 billion. And it said, for additional funding over 4 years for veteran income support and compensation to help support more than 350,000 veterans and dependents who access DVA services. Why wasn't this estimate included in the budget rather than MyEFO?
Because it was an update, Senator, and it goes to your earlier question about our claims processing times. What it indicates is that we were continuing between budget and MyEFO to process claims at a faster rate, and there was that update required in the MyEFO numbers about compensation payments being made to veterans because of the processing occurring at faster.
It was unanticipated, and this is because of the demand-driven model?
It was, some increase was anticipated, but we don't know exactly what that amount is. Is there anything further my colleagues would like to add to that?
Senator Andrew Kefford, Deputy Secretary, Policy and Programs. In the last budget, there was an additional 6.8 billion in benefits included across the forwards for Program 1.6.
Yeah.
As the Secretary's outlined here, between the update that was in the budget and the update was included in the MyEFO, what we've seen is additional decision making, and so an additional 1.8 billion, 1.6 of it in the budget, in the current budget year 24/5 and 0.3 in the next year, being on top of that the amount provided for in the budget based on new estimates of our activity and the claims actually going out the door. So since, going back to your questions about clearing the backlog and so on, from the 22-23 portfolio budget submission, there's been a total of an additional 12.4 billion across the forward estimates in payments to veterans under that Program 1.6.
Right, so a total of 12.4 across the forwards.
And that program now totals close to 20 billion across the forward estimates.
Right. Okay. When we look at the staffing levels in the portfolio additional estimate statements, you've got staffing levels increasing. So as at the end of January 2025, they were FTEs were expected to be 1,029.9.
That must just be in one outcome, Senator. That's not the whole department.
That's not the whole department. Okay. Then, well, in page 44 of the portfolio additional estimate statement, with the costings for staff, employee benefits and costings, it actually shows a decline in costs for staff, going from 396.9 million in 24-25 to 349.5 million in 26-27. Are you expecting to lose some staff, or why would employee benefits be going backwards?
We haven't lost any staff, Senator. We're just working through that table. The staffing numbers in the department have continued to increase, and the current ASL level in the department is 3,448. So we're just looking at your table and trying to ascertain...
Table 3.2A.
I can't understand. I don't understand. Senator, we might need to confirm with someone to be able to give you a good answer. If you would just give me a few minutes if you want to move on, I will see if I can get you an answer to that question, Senator. I can't immediately reconcile that number, but let me just check, Senator, and we'll come back to you as soon as we possibly can.
I might add to that, though. I'll take you to page 13, which actually has the ASL numbers on, and that does show the increase from 2023-24 at 3,277 ASL to 2024-25 at 3,448 ASL. And that 3,448 ASL is an increase from the 2024-25 PBS, which was 3,188 ASL. But as the Secretary said, we'll try and get some more information on why that specific reduction happened.
I am interested because, you know, we've read the reports about not having a bit of a budget black hole for APS salary increases, and if staffing numbers are going up and the APS salaries are going up because you've all been awarded a pay rise, which I'm fine with, but I don't understand how your employee benefits can be going backwards when you've got more staff and pay rises expected.
We're going to...
You work on that.
It could be about non-ongoing staff or something, Senator.
But if they're not ongoing, are they marked as FTEs in the reports?
Senator Davey, I think rather than have our officers just speculate, why don't we allow Ms Frayne to get the information as she suggested, and we'll deal with some other matters.
I am happy to move on, and when they're ready to answer, that's fine. I just want to ask about the new Veteran Services Commission, which was a recommendation of the Royal Commission, and the government, in their response to the Royal Commission, accepted that recommendation and then set about going through the process. They appointed Mr Michael Manthorpe, PSM, to the role as an interim commissioner, Veteran Services Commissioner. That appointment was announced on the 17th of January. The announcement didn't say when Mr Manthorpe commenced his role. Do you know when the commencement date was?
I'll check the exact date, Senator, for you, but it was approximately 3 weeks ago, I think, but I will need to confirm again the exact date, because he commenced with PM&C, of course, Senator, not in DVA or Defence. So his role as the interim commissioner is based in PM&C, and that's where he's located. So I will just need to confirm that exact start date, but it was approximately 3 weeks ago.
That's fine. Also, the term of his appointment, if he's interim, that indicates that he would have been appointed for a term. But then, so am I to gather that PMNC are then responsible for establishing the commission, the office, and recruiting a permanent commissioner?
That's correct, Senator. So he is not, he is doing exactly what you said there, setting up the commission, and will take them to the point where there is legislation around in a standalone act, and the commission commences with an appointed commissioner for a period of the first term.
Well, we've now
the commissioner's appointment.
We've now had the passage of the Act to establish the commission.
That's correct, Senator. It's currently in the Defence Act, as you know,
yes.
And there are processes over the next 6 months, up till September, when that would be all finalised and commence with the commission proper in September 2025.
So, but the funding for the commission and the commissioner comes out of the DVA budget, is that correct?
No, Senator. As part of the government response that was released in December, funding was provided to PMNC for that purpose.
So when we read that $5 million over 2 years to appoint an interim head and establish a cross-agency task force to provide advice to the government on the implementation, that's not from DVA.
That amount wasn't from DVA, and it's provided to PMNC. There was a separate $4.5 million provided to DVA to support our work on the consultation in relation to the agency that the Royal Commission recommended to deal with veteran wellbeing, as well as the consultation on the proposed ESO peak body.
Okay. With regards to the commissioner, when was the department, was DVA tasked to draft the amendment to the streamlining bill that we dealt with in February?
We had carriage of the Vets Bill, now Vets Act, as it was. The process in relation to the schedule dealing with the Commission itself, the work on that came about following the tabling of proposed amendments in the Senate, but DVA led the work with the Minister in what became the government amendments that established the Commission.
And did that work commence after Mr Manthorpe had been announced? The announcement was made on the 17th of January. We only saw the proposed amendment in the first week of February.
Senator, I will confirm the details. It's my recollection, though, that the discussions that were happening about the establishment of the Commission coincided with Mr Manthorpe's commencement in the role.
So, because when he was announced in the role as an interim, and it was said he would help co-design, consult with stakeholders to establish the Commission from September, and then quite quickly, and when I talked to stakeholders, none of them were aware that we then had legislation drafted and before us in the Senate to vote on to actually establish the body. So is that, what role now does Mr Manthorpe have now that the body is already legislated?
Well, Senator, the government has indicated that Mr Manthorpe will still conduct the consultation that he was announced, or that his role was announced to undertake. Clearly now starting from the position of amendments that have been now enacted, but both that process will play out before September, as was previously intended, and will involve discussions with stakeholders. And obviously you'd be aware that the Senate itself has established as part of the process a Senate inquiry, I think,
yes,
by this committee into the same provisions.
We did, perhaps I can add a few additional pieces of information in response to some of the earlier questions, Senator. So work was ongoing on the Commission from the day that we provided the response to the Royal Commission. And I know that is something that Mr Brown can speak to some degree. We did have the opportunity, because the bill was introduced at the end of last calendar year, but it didn't pass until February, to work with stakeholders across the Parliament to introduce the amendment. And I think it is fair to say that this was articulated as a high priority. Getting this body in place was a high priority for the veterans community. I also can confirm that our expectation is that there will be a merit-based process for the appointment of a permanent commissioner, or for the ongoing commissioner, I should say. And I think Ms Frame may have some information about the starting date for the interim commissioner. Is that correct?
He commenced on the 29th of January in PM&C.
29th. Thank you for
Thanks,
getting
Senator
back to me. Just one more on the commissioner. One of the functions of the commissioner that was in the amendments that we passed in the Senate was that the commissioner is to inquire into, monitor and report on the state of the defence and veteran ecosystem. I have had a lot of questions. What does that mean? Is there a what is the defence and veteran ecosystem?
I think I'll provide an initial response, and officials may well have additional information, but we spoke about this a little bit in the second reading debate and in the committee stage in the Senate. Essentially, it is constructed in that way so as to be deliberately broad. It's not just about supervising public servants, it's about acknowledging that the experience of serving personnel and veterans occurs within a broader organisational context. There are a range of organisations that work within that community, and we wanted to make sure that the implementation, in implementing the recommendations of the Commission, we were paying attention to the effectiveness of that implementation process across the entire range of organisations, places and communities in which veterans are living and working, not just a narrow focus on the public sector itself. Is that an accurate articulation of it, Ms Frame? Mr Brown?
I think that's a very good characterisation.
Yeah. Luke Brown, First Assistant Secretary, Policy Division. I would just clarify, Senator, that it is also the state of the defence and veteran ecosystem as it relates to the prevention of suicide and suicidality. So it is very specific. It's not a broad slather function in relation to the whole veteran ecosystem.
That provides some clarity. In the intro, I've just got a couple, with the Chair's permission, I've just got a couple of questions about marking First World War Private Grants Program. That is a very long title. When it was announced on the 11th of May 2022, prior to the election, the announcement for $3.7 million in funding for the Headstone project, and the announcement was very specific, and said, and I quote, Labor will commit an additional $3.7 million in funding for the Headstone project. And then it went on to say, the Headstone project is a registered charity recognised by the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission. How much of the $3.7 million promised to the Headstone project has gone to the Headstone project, which is a registered charity in Tasmania, I believe?
Deputy Secretary McLaren will assist with this program, Senator.
Alison McLaren, Deputy Secretary, Veteran Family and Stakeholder Experience. So, Senator, when the program was originally announced as a pilot program, that the grant opportunity guidelines were undertaken, I'll have to take it on notice about how much money went to that particular charity, but that's not how the program is administered now. At this point, the program is administered by the Department of Veterans Affairs, and that money goes out the door to community organisations and those who make an application through the program.
So the funding announcement, which is actually quite specific about the Headstone project being a registered charity, and that the 3.7 million is funding for the Headstone project, but you're now saying actually the funding was actually for a grants program, and the Headstone project was only one body that could apply for grants.
I'll have to take on notice how that project how that particular charity has or has not been involved in this particular program. But what I can advise you is in the latest round, it was fully subscribed and that every eligible application was funded.
I'm glad you came to the latest round. I'll accept you taking that on notice, and I might table this original announcement just so the people following on at home know why I'm concerned, because to a layman reading that announcement, you could be mistaken for thinking that the Headstone project would get $3.7 million. So I'll table that so everyone can read it if it's accepted. Well, I'll get that. Yeah. I'll get it. So coming to the actual rounds, we've got future funding estimates for marking First World War private Graves Grants program across the forwards from 24-25. How much of the 3.7 million has gone out prior to 24-25?
So as we discussed at the last estimates, Senator, that program is no longer 3.7 million, as we found significant savings in the administering the program, so that the program is now $437,000 in grant funding. In the last round, we gave a total of $106,978.90.
And so what financial year was that?
That's the outcomes of the round announced on the 19th of February, which is the 24-25 round.
24, so $106,000...
$978.90.
178. So in response to our question SQ 24000401, when we asked after last time that it appeared that funding had been reduced, the answer actually said that funding had not been reduced, but the grant funding over forwards would be $437,000. Administrative funding would be $1.063 million. But the answer actually said the funding hadn't been reduced. So I'm just scratching my head as to why it doesn't add up.
So what it says in the answer is that the grant funding offered to applicants through the program had not been reduced. What had been reduced was the costs associated with administering the program.
But, so applicants were never going to get 3.7 million. They were only...
the cost of the total program was initially costed at 3.7 million.
So it was initially costed at 3.7. You found administrative savings, but you're still paying about... For every dollar that goes out in a grant, you're paying about $2 to lick the stamps.
Well, it's not to lick the stamps. There's significantly costs associated in the plan, design and the management of a program. That a lot of this program is run through the Community Grants Hub. That there is, they do the design of the forms. There is due diligence that needs to be undertaken for each of these applications. There's grant agreements that need to be executed. There's reports and acquittals that need to be undertaken.
Okay, so, and this first round that you've just announced for 106 plus thousand.
That's the second round. That's the current round.
Second round. And that is for 182 graves that they've identified, and you said it was fully subscribed.
Yes, so that every application that was received, so we received 31 applications.
Right.
One was non-compliant with the eligibility requirements, 2 were withdrawn, and the remaining 28 were approved, and all will receive funding.
And if I read the announcement right, it will go through, it's going out to 9 organisations.
Yes,
so obviously some of those organisations had multiple applications. That's fine. When will the next round open?
So I'll ask Mr. Brewer on the...
Mark Brewer, Deputy President. The next round is to be determined in terms of when it will be opened. It's up to the Minister to determine the schedule.
I forgot about that. there might be something in the way in between. Okay.
Yeah, but the cycle continues.
The cycle continues.
Right.
The funding's there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll need to wrap up there, unfortunately, for you, Senator Davey. Now, Senator Green's been waiting very patiently.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry that we don't have a lot of time to get through these questions. Ms. Frame, I'll try to paraphrase and not put too much of a preamble. I wanted to ask about the backlog. We've asked about it many times, but the Royal Commission found that there was a backlog of 42,000 veteran compensation claims. I think it peaked at 45,000, am I correct? And these are claims that the backlog is claims that weren't even allocated to someone to look at yet.
That's correct. In line with the Royal Commission's recommendation, yes, it referred to unallocated claims.
And as Senator Davey alluded to, the backlog has been cleared. When did that happen? In February 2024. And that means that all of those 42,000 or 45,000 were allocated to someone.
That's correct.
You said 98% of them have been determined.
Determined, yes.
Now, I think I'm sure that part of that achievement and delivering that outcome from the Royal Commission is due to your leadership, but maybe also to your staff and their hard work.
Definitely, Senator, definitely.
I understand the government provided additional funding for more staff to achieve this. What was the staffing levels that they have allocated to you?
The Royal Commission recommended, Senator, 500 additional ongoing staff, and that recommendation was agreed by the government and implemented, and since that time DVA has carried many of those additional number, and the 500 were realised and have been retained as well, Senator. So we have that net 500, and there's been some additional staff also allocated in excess of that.
An additional 141, is
That's
that
correct,
right?
Senator,
So there's about 640 new staff that are working on this important delivery. The 640 staff, well, sorry, I'll rephrase the question so I can reduce the time. We had asked the former Secretary at Budget Estimates in 9th of November 2022 what would be the impact on when the backlog would be cleared if additional staffing wasn't provided, and the answer the former Secretary gave was never, which is a absolutely startling revelation at the time, but now makes the work that your staff have achieved even more significant. What do you think the impact has been on veterans and the veteran community of clearing that backlog?
Really significant, Senator, and we had some earlier questions about revisions to estimates and budget and MyEFO, revisions upwards about money going out the door to veterans in compensation payments. That's reflected in those figures in budget statements, and that is a direct reflection of the compensation decisions that are being made, Senator. That results in dollars going to veterans, and I'm really pleased that you acknowledge the staff, because they are the people who have been doing all of that work and making those decisions and determinations on a daily basis, and it's driven by the staff in the Client Benefits Division, who are driving all those outcomes, Senator.
I think the connection and the point I was seeking to clarify is that the 42,000 isn't just a number, it actually equates to veterans having compensation being paid to them now, that those claims have been determined. Not in every case, but in most cases.
That's correct, and increasingly so, as evidenced, as I said, by the dollars. That's the correlation. The decisions and determinations made correlate to the dollars that need to be revised in line with the quantum of decisions being made.
Government
in the
has to spend that money. It's important. I met some of your staff in Townsville, and they weren't all working on claims. They obviously have a vast array of services that they deliver, but not all your staff are located in Canberra. That's right?
Yes, that's correct, Senator. In fact, most of our staff are not located in Canberra.
And where are they located?
We have offices in every capital city, and as you said, office in Townsville. And that's actually becoming a bigger office as well. But we have most of our staff located outside of the ACT.
I asked you what the impact was on the veterans community of clearing the backlog. What would be the impact if the department effectively went backwards in their resourcing?
In line with what Secretary Cosson presented to the committee a few years ago about the backlog never being eliminated, obviously any reduction in the staffing numbers, and as I've already alluded to, the increasing number of claims coming in as well, if the staffing numbers were reduced, the people making those decisions, it would obviously have a rapid impact on the decisions that were starting to sit for longer then with the department for allocation and then for decision. So it would be new backlogs would begin to emerge, Senator, because there would not be the same number of staff to make those decisions as they are every day now.
What do you think the impact on the veteran community would be if there was a cut to your staff?
Again, the decisions on their claims that have lodged with the department would take longer. They would wait longer for those determinations and would not be receiving the benefits.
Thank you. I might leave it there, Chair. I think it's pretty clear what I'm alluding to is the public service cuts that are being foreshadowed by the Leader of the Opposition. Thank you to your staff. They've done an incredible job and their jobs deserve to be protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. I will pass that on.
All right. Now, were there any questions that people... Sorry?
Quick
follow up on that? Just very quickly. Just very quickly, please.
One, possibly two quick questions. I think for Mr Kefford about open arms. I understand the Community and Public Sector Union have raised concerns about the expiry of significant number of non-ongoing roles at Open Arms, the important work that they do in terms of supporting veterans and their families around mental health. Can you just outline what's happening there?
Certainly, Senator, and to put the answer in context, I just might observe that in June of 22, Open Arms comprised 68 Australian public servants and 376 labour hire staff. The current equivalent figures are 359 public servants on an ongoing basis, 114 non-ongoing public servants and a smaller number of labour hire employees. The particular issue that we have been engaging with, and I'm pleased to say we have been in a position to move to offering ongoing positions, is under both the Fair Work Act and the relevant Public Service Commissioner's directions, there is a hard 18-month time limit on non-ongoing contracts. So as we've moved through the process of converting those, particularly the labour hire staff, to non-ongoing first in Open Arms, we've now been in a position, there were 260 additional staff approved in the MIFO, and as a result of that and as a result of merit-based selection rounds, which I've been in a position to conclude we are now in a position to offer ongoing positions. So we have been speaking with the union directly in relation to this matter, and we appreciate their concern for the staff. As Senator Green was just saying, the Open Arms is a highly valued service, both the clinical service as well as that provided by the peers, and that's all a function of the dedication of the colleagues. And while the process to manage the conversion and the merit selection process and decision making on that merit selection process has taken time, and I acknowledge that as the window on non-ongoing contracts comes close. The first date that was relevant was at the end of March, and so we are close to those contracts expiring, and as I said, is a hard date, but we are in a position to now, as a result of those merit selection process, make ongoing appointments to Open Arms.
So 359 ongoing.
Yes. I have a series of important questions. Sure.
I think 359 ongoing positions is also particularly important for people to know about, actually.
For people who provide mental health support.
Senator Shoebridge, we've been very patient and you're just wasting everyone's time. Like, you're actually being quite greedy here and you're just effectively just wasted a minute of everyone's time.
And you have prevented me from asking a single question of veterans.
Well, this is the way you treat the veterans community and other senators.
No, the way you treat the veterans. This is about blast overpressure. Questions about blast overpressure. You won't let me even put to DVA.
You're a disgrace.
You won't even let me put the questions about blast overpressure to DVA. It's outrageous.
All right. Well, unfortunately, it's almost 10 o'clock. Did you have any other things to add there, Senator Darmody? On that note, we're going to adjourn. Being 10 o'clock, thank you very much to the department. Thank you to all your officers and all to the workers who do an outstanding job about clearing those backlogs and obviously helping our veterans and their families. That concludes today's proceedings. The committee is due to recommence its examinations of the additional estimates tomorrow. So look forward to seeing everyone then. I'd like to thank Minister McAllister, Mr Moriarty from the Department of Defence, the Admiral Johnston, Ms Frame from the Department of Veterans Affairs, and all the other officers and staff who've made today tick along. And on that note, can I say thank you to everyone and have a good night.
Thank you, Chair.